G'day, today's training module is on resistance training or weight training. Resistance training may include training to develop either strength, power, hypertrophy or endurance. Now note that power can be broken into two, one with a strength emphasis, which would be like weightlifting or Olympic lifting, or a speed emphasis, whereby it might be a lower intensity or lower resistance, such as a jump squat or a clap push-up. The phase of training that you are working on will dictate the rep range, the load, speed of movement, and the rest between sets. Now, the repetition ranges for the various phases of training are: for strength or power, ideally it's 1 to 2 reps for an elite or a highly trained type person. For most of the personal best clients, however, we wouldn't normally work in a 1 to 2 rep range. So if we're working on strength for a regular personal best client, we would normally be in the 3 to 6 rep range, and that would be at a 94 to 85% of their 1 RM. It would be similar for power, that is with a strength emphasis. So again, 3 to 6 reps and at an intensity of 80 to 90% of their 1 RM. If that power training is with a speed emphasis, it would be 6+ repetitions per set, and the intensity would be anywhere from 30 to 80% of the 1 RM. For a combination of strength and hypertrophy, we're looking at that 6 to 8 rep range, and the intensity would be 80 to 85% of the client's 1 RM. For pure hypertrophy, ideally we're looking at between 8 and 14 repetitions, and that intensity would be between 65 and 80% of the 1 RM. Just note there that your muscles can't actually count how many repetitions you do. It's really about the time under tension. So if you're in a hypertrophy set, as an example, and you get through those 10 or 12 repetitions very quickly, let's say in 30 seconds, it's really not that beneficial from a hypertrophy point of view. What you're aiming for is for that set to last for between 50 and 60 seconds. So you want to make those repetitions as slow as necessary in order to make the set between 50 and 60 seconds. And finally, we have endurance, which is generally 15+ reps, and it's at an intensity of around 65% of your 1 RM. Just note that there should be a warm-up for each body part before you work on that particular body part. So for each of the legs, back and chest, you should do a warm-up set of somewhere between 50 and 60% of the 1 RM. If you are working at a higher intensity, so you're at a heavier strength or power type phase, then you might need to have more than one warm-up set. Now, just to make it easier for you to work out the percentage of your 1 RM load for the various rep ranges, obviously if you're at your maximum, that is 100% of what you can do for a particular lift, and that's your 1 RM. If you were looking to do, let's say, 4 repetitions, you would select a weight that is 90% of your 1 RM. Another example would be 12 reps. So if you're looking at a hypertrophy phase where you're looking at 12 reps, you would select a weight 70% of the 1 RM, and you can look at that in reverse. So if you know your client can do 10 repetitions at 75 kilograms and you want to go to a lower rep range, you can use this table to get an indication as to what the ideal weight should be for that particular person. Note that when you are estimating a weight for a client, you should err on the side of caution. So be a little bit conservative and just use trial and error as well to get the ideal weight for a particular client. Next, we have guidelines for resistance training. And firstly, specificity. Now, specificity in muscle action is important in planning resistance training programs for particular activities. As with all types of physical training, there is a high degree of task specificity with resistance training. Task specificity refers to the movement pattern and strength or power output necessary for successful completion of a specific task. Physiological adaptations brought about by a particular training program are specific to the training program performed. Therefore, the best training program to use to become better at a specific task, such as a certain sport or physical activity, should mimic the characteristics of that task. That includes velocity of movement, the angles used, and whether it's a concentric or eccentric contraction emphasis. Ultimately, the amount of transfer from the resistance training program to the functional activity or everyday task or athletic skill is an important part of the benefits of a resistance training program. Next, we have range of motion. Normally, most resistance training exercises are performed through the greatest range of motion safely allowed by each individual's body. Note that this will vary from one person to the next. This results in strength and power gains throughout the greatest range of motion possible. Generally, the goal of a resistance training program is to increase the strength and power throughout the range of motion at a joint. For some activities, however, for example, volleyball, some sets for squat jump type exercises may be performed in some training phases only through the range of motion used when performing a vertical jump in volleyball. Next, we have progressive overload. So, most important for a client to progress, this refers to the gradual increase of training stress placed on the body during any physical training program, including resistance training. Once a person adapts to the demands of a specific training program, if the person does not adjust some element of the program to make the training more difficult to perform, then continued adaptations such as continued increases in strength will not occur. Progressive overload may be accomplished by either increasing the resistance used in performing a specific number of repetitions or increasing the number of repetitions performed using a specific resistance. Maybe increasing the speed with which the concentric portion of a repetition is performed, especially if that training goal is to increase maximal power. It might be shortening the rest periods between sets so that more total work is performed in the same total training time. This may be especially important if a training goal is to increase muscular endurance. It may be lengthening rest periods between sets and exercises and increase the resistance used. Because of the longer rest period, more recovery occurs, thus allowing the use of a heavier resistance. This may be important if a training goal is to increase maximal strength or power. And it also may be accomplished by increasing the training volume overall, that is, increasing the number of sets or the number of repetitions per set. Resistance increases should be manageable but challenging. Progressions of 5% or less are suitable for most people, but will largely depend upon the client's training age and phase of training. Frequency. Extensive studies conclude that for untrained individuals, a frequency of 3 days per week per muscle group is optimal. And for trained individuals, a frequency of 2 days per week per muscle group is optimal. You may hypothesize that the optimal training frequency may be lower in trained individuals than in untrained individuals because the studies of the trained individuals used higher training volumes. Frequency must always be considered as the frequency of working a particular muscle group. Whatever the frequency used in weight training, the total program, including all other types of training sessions, must be considered because training forms that do not involve weights will affect recovery between weight training sessions. So in a nutshell, with regard to weight training, you should train a particular body part at least within 5 days of the previous workout. So let's say you have a workout on Monday. If you don't train that same body area by Saturday, you will start to lose some of the benefit of that previous workout. So if you look at 2 to 3 weight training workouts per week, then you've got that 5 days covered. Now, cardiovascular benefits with regard to weight training. Increases in endurance activity performance, such as for a 5 or 10 kilometre run time, may be improved by the addition of resistance training to a conditioning program in untrained individuals, moderately trained individuals, and trained endurance athletes. Interestingly, these increases in performance occur despite no increase in peak oxygen consumption. It seems the increases in performance have been attributed to an increase in the lactic acid threshold. The lactic acid threshold is the pace that can be maintained with minimal increase in tissue lactic acid or increasing acidity. This suggests that resistance training should be a part of total training program to bring about improved cardiovascular economy and metabolic efficiency, no matter what the cardiovascular activity, for example, running, swimming, cycling. Some of the acute program variables include exercise choice, exercise order, the number of sets of an exercise, training intensity, and the length of rest periods between sets. Let's firstly look at exercise choice. As with all resistance training programs, choices concerning workout variables such as what exercises to perform should be made based on the training goals of the program. Multi-joint exercises such as the squat, power snatch, clean, lat pull down, and bench press involve a large muscle mass and complex neural activation and coordination of the involved muscle mass. Because of these factors, multi-joint exercises are the most effective exercises for increasing total body strength and power. Additionally, power-oriented total body exercises, such as the power clean and the power snatch, have been regarded as the most effective exercises for increasing total body power because of the fast velocity at which these exercises are performed and the necessity of developing force quickly to successfully complete a repetition. So if the goal of training is to increase total body strength or power, multi-joint exercises should be included in the training program. Multi-joint exercises, because of the large muscle mass involved, have also shown the greatest metabolic responses and the greatest acute response of some hormones, such as increased growth hormone. The acute metabolic and hormonal responses of multi-joint exercises have direct implications for their use when the goals of a program target increased local muscle endurance, lean body mass, or reduction in body fat. If the goal of the program is bodybuilding, then isolation exercises can be useful. Otherwise, best to stick with compound type exercises. A general rule to remember is that every time you change the angle, you change the exercise. This therefore provides you with an even greater array of exercise options to utilize. Next, we've got exercise order. Now, minimizing fatigue before performing multi-joint exercises such as a squat and deadlift and power-oriented exercises is an important consideration. Performing these exercises early in the training session allows the use of the heaviest resistance for the desired number of repetitions, which may be necessary for maximizing total body strength, power, and hypertrophy. Multi-joint exercises also require greater neural coordination than single-joint exercises. Therefore, when training for strength and power, performing these exercises early in a training session before fatigue sets in may enhance exercise performance by optimizing neural recruitment. In general, the sequence of exercises for both multiple and single muscle group exercises should be large muscle group exercises before small muscle group exercises, multi-joint before single joint exercises, explosive or power lifts like Olympic lifts before basic strength and single joint exercises, exercises for weak areas of the body before exercises for strong areas of the body, and most intense to least intense for the same muscle group. Note that resistance training should be dependent on the client's specific needs and goals. The client's training age must be considered in prescribing the intensity and type of training. Next, the number of sets. The number of sets performed is one of the factors affecting training volume. The number of sets does affect the nervous, metabolic, and muscular acute response to resistance training. For example, the acute growth hormone response is greater with multiple set than with single set training sessions. Gains in strength and muscle hypertrophy have been shown with both single set and multiple set training programs. However, the majority of studies demonstrate greater strength gains with multiple set programs, and no study comparing single sets to multiple sets has shown single sets to result in greater maximal strength gains. During the initial weeks of training, that is up to about 15 weeks, untrained individuals show the same increases in strength regardless of whether single or multiple set programs are performed. This indicates that initially, untrained individuals can perform single set programs and show the same strength gains as those achievable with multiple set programs. However, after a short initial period, if maximal strength gains are to be achieved, multiple set programs must be employed. The probable reason for no initial difference in strength gains in untrained individuals with multiple or single set programs is that both types of programs initially bring about relatively equivalent neural adaptations. And initially, neural adaptations cause the majority of strength gains in untrained individuals. After this initial period, multiple sets are necessary for bringing about further physiological adaptations, resulting in maximal strength gains. Training intensity. This is largely based on the resistance used for the exercise and the number of repetitions performed. Other variables for resistance training intensity include the speed of movement or contraction, the rest periods, whether there's an eccentric emphasis, using supersets or drop sets, pre-exhaustion sets, pyramids, and high rep sets. Generally, those higher intensity type training programs should only be used with people with a little bit of experience with weight training. And finally, we have rest periods. The length of rest periods between sets and exercises influence the hormonal, metabolic, and cardiorespiratory responses to a resistance training session. The duration of rest periods also affects the amount of recovery that occurs between sets and exercises, thereby affecting the amount of fatigue experienced as the training session progresses. Short rest periods of approximately 1 minute between sets result in several significant physiological changes, including acute hormonal changes such as increased growth hormone in the blood, are significantly greater than with 3-minute rest periods. Although acute hormonal changes are not a direct assessment of muscle hypertrophy, these acute hormonal changes have generally been regarded as significant for development of muscle hypertrophy and have shown significant correlations to the development of muscle hypertrophy in both fast twitch and slow twitch muscle fibers. Local muscular endurance is typically defined as the maximal number of repetitions that can be performed with a specific resistance, such as the number of repetitions at 65% of your 1RM. Nevertheless, use of shorter rest periods contributes to improved ability to tolerate the high acidic conditions of exercise that occur beyond a few repetitions. Because of the previously mentioned factors, it is recommended that when training to emphasize increases in maximal strength and power, rest periods of 2 to 3 minutes between sets should be used. When training to emphasize muscle hypertrophy, rest periods of up to 1 minute are recommended. When training to emphasize muscular endurance, rest periods of less than 30 seconds should be used. Unless you have a client who has a goal to increase strength to high levels, it may not be practical to have 2 to 3 minute rests between sets. As a guide, you could consider the following rest periods, which will allow 12 sets of exercises in 24 minutes, no matter what the phase of training. So for example, in a strength set, you might have 20 to 30 seconds work and then 90 to 100 seconds rest. For a power workout, it would be the same. Well, similar, 20 to 30 seconds rest, 20 to 30 seconds work, 90 to 100 seconds rest. For a hypertrophy set, it might be 60 seconds of work, 60 seconds of rest. And for endurance, it might be 90 seconds of work and just 30 seconds of rest. With regard to exercise prescription, depending upon the frequency of training and goals of the client, a PT program may be a full body resistance training program or 2 or 3-way split. Although 3-way splits are very uncommon for PB clients due to the frequency of their training and the goals generally. If the program is a 2-way split, it may be either broken down into push and pull exercises on separate days, or it might be broken down into upper or lower body exercises. You'll find a list of exercises in your trainer manual. Your resistance training prescription should be largely based on the Group A exercises, with exercises in Group B used sparingly. The exercises in Group C should be avoided due to their lack of effectiveness or their increased risk of injury. I hope this has been informative for you. Once again, if you have any questions, please feel free to ask, and you will find slightly more extended notes within your trainer manual. Have a great day.